There you go.
Okay, so today is Wednesday, March 16th. This is the first meeting of the SSPA interest group of applied psychophysiology. And we have the honor of welcoming Dr. Curtis Wilds, who is alumna of Saybrook's Applied Psychophysiology program, and who is an excellent researcher in Las Vegas, working in optimal functioning for putting together programs for the Department of Defense, which of course is an extremely important thing in our crazy world, and very important to our serving population. So Curtis was invited to speak about the latest and greatest things in optimal functioning, and I will now turn it over to Curtis. Sorry.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen here.
Did I screw that up? I don't think I did. Let me double check.
No, that was me.
Okay, there we go. Okay.
Okay, can we see all right?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so we're going to kind of talk a little bit super casual tonight, everybody. So I've got a lot of videos, just kind of a good conversation tonight for sure. I know that there might not necessarily be a ton of people that are in the optimal functioning portion of the PhD program. How many do we have actually here with us? Do we know, or is everybody pretty much
You can raise your hand, whether you do a virtual hand raising or raise your hand. It looks like Andrea's raising her hand.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I'm a wannabe. I'm clinical, but I just went to an optional functioning webinar online today during lunch. So I
nice.
I love
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
Counts and then the optimal functioning masters. So.
Yeah, no, perfect. So kind of the unique element with it is obviously if you're clinically registered and have a license to practice and be able to operate within that kind of mental health capacity. Myself, my background, for those of you that don't necessarily know who I am, my background is in sports medicine. So I've worked specifically with Olympic, professional, and now military active individuals and athletes. And found myself at Saybrook kind of looking at the bridging the gap between mind body medicine. I started in the MBM program and then had a conversation with Dr. Sherman about why we are the science behind meditation works. And I got hooked right there. So that was, I changed programs the next semester. The rest is history, which is really fantastic. I'm looking at you guys on a different screen, so sorry if you're looking at the side of my face for that. But so really the interesting part coming to Saybrook and looking at the optimal functioning department was, how can I utilize the same skill set that I've used for the last 20 years in sports medicine and really bridge that gap between cognitive performance and mind-body therapies. And so I found myself here within Nellis Air Force Base, working with the pararescue group, the 58th Rescue Squadron, and they have a human performance optimization wing within the U.S. Air Force, and there's multiple elements across different entities within the DoD, but I specifically work with human performance for the Air Force. And there is a huge trend that's pushing towards mission readiness and optimal readiness, while also improving the longevity of the special operators' time in the military. So yeah, we're going to kind of talk a little bit about all these things today. If you guys have any questions, just kind of chime in at any time. Like I said, super casual today. We're going to be watching a bunch of videos and kind of discussing as we go along. Okay. Okay, so human performance optimization and optimal functioning. So kind of similar statements, but very different in ideas. So what we are doing specifically in our department is we're looking at human performance optimization. So we have an integrative team with sports medicine athletic trainers, we have physical therapists, we have strength and conditioning coaches, we have LCSWs, we have 4 Charlies, which are mental health technicians. We also have clinical psychologists, nutritionists, and then a primary care sports medicine physician, all within one clinic, which is a very, very, very robust staff. We are very unique and we are very fortunate to have that amount of staff with us. So we're able to really focus on different integrative elements. And the really nice part is all of us have kind of a, I say scope creep, not in a bad way, but we all are kind of cross-trained and educated and have certifications that kind of bridge the gap between all of them, which is really, really nice. So what we're going to kind of talk about is, so this hierarchy of function. So optimal functioning would also include, if we're looking at cognitive dysfunction as it relates to pre or post exposure, or if it is an athlete who is dealing with a clinical diagnosis outside of sports functioning. So again, 2 separate silos that we're going to talk about in terms of clinical diagnoses, and then how can we actually just improve the physical output of an individual. So again, very different from the traditional clinical setting in terms of, working on cognitive dysfunction. But again, all of this crosstalk is really necessary for a true holistic and integrative approach. So what we look at the physical elements, and we want to do what's called removing the negative. So we look at injury prevention and risk reduction for all of these movements. Athletes and military individuals, or tactical athletes, as kind of the term is being coined, they are always inundated with physicality before anything else. So they're going to learn skills always, whether that's running, jumping, shooting, climbing, etc. So they're always physicality involved with their learning. So we really want to kind of hone in on that bottom layer in order to kind of get buy-in as well. Just like we have clinical issues with compliance with our normal patients, we also want to identify how we can get buy-in for athletes as well. And we're going to take a look at the health and well-being, including our physical and spiritual. So within human performance optimization, they have 4 silos, which is nutrition, spirituality, mental health, and then physical health. And all together, that is incorporated into what we call a resilient individual. And so again, we look at mental performance or mental health. Again, the stigma behind the words of mental health are often negative. So we've made the shift into a mental performance. And spiritual fitness is the other element as well, because some individuals have a negative relationship with spirituality. So they're looking for ways to kind of reduce the nomenclature stigma around specific elements. And then lastly, once we have all those nice elements in place, the idea is that mission performance and mission enhancement and optimal readiness all coincide and are maintained as the individual is able to kind of build on those elements. Now, the opposite of this must be true as well, that if any of these elements are a little bit out of whack, that takes a lot harder and it takes a lot more effort to maintain that optimal readiness as well. Any questions so far on that? Cool, we'll keep going. All right, so the first video that we have, so anybody that was in my professionals talk a couple of years ago at the RCs is going to see this video again. So I love it a lot. So we're going to take a look at For the Love of the Game, one of my favorite parts of the game or the movie.
I can't hear anything if the movie's supposed to have sound.
Curtis, are we supposed to have sound with this?
Okay, hopefully you guys all heard that, yeah?
No.
No, oh no!
No.
Okay,
No.
how
sound at all.
unfortunate. No sound, okay. Well, that is gonna make things a lot more interesting. Let me see if doing this helps. So basically,
Now, actually, we can't hear you either. Curtis, can you hear us? We're not hearing you either now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you.
Okay. Audio, thank you. Okay, so you can hear me now, hopefully.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay,
I can
so
hear you, but not the video.
We couldn't hear Kevin.
okay. Yeah, no, that's all right. So basically, what happens in it? So we hear the huge crowd, 70,000 people that are going on and on and on, heckling him, etc. Then you kind of see it, everything blurs out. So what he says clear the mechanism, and not his way of narrowing focus. So we had a little bit of a talk about hypnosis and all these other elements, and we're going to talk about active meditation here as well. So athletes, and what athletes have to necessarily deal with is doing their job in front of hundreds of thousands of people. So if you can imagine being in your clinical setting, working with one specific patient, and then having 70,000 people screaming at you, telling you that you're terrible, that you suck, that you should go home, all these things, all these negative elements that are being bombarded towards you. So athletes have a very unique ability. The top athletes, I should say, have a very unique ability to quiet their mind and to remove all of those elements. I always use the example of a hockey goalie. If they miss the puck and it's scored, the first thing that happens is a huge siren goes off, right? Red noise. So you have a negative association with it. Everybody knows that you failed at a task specific to your job. And that is a huge element that athletes have to deal with and have to learn how to manage their stress. The same can be said about our tactical athletes and our military representatives, that they have to deal with a huge amount of peripheral distractions while they're doing their job. Specifically, my guys that are working as pararescuemen, they are specifically trained to block out all of that peripheral noise so they can focus on saving somebody's life as paramedics. And if they don't focus on that, then obviously there are detrimental effects that can happen to that. Any questions so far, other than what was going on in that video?
I just have a
Right.
quick question for Michael, since he's sitting here. Is, as a jet pilot, do you get this type of training when you're doing your thing?
No, at least in the fighter pilot world right now, there is, like Chris mentioned, a optimizing the human weapon system is what they call it for us, effort. It's primarily physical because typically we have a lot of back and neck problems by moving around in the jet under G. But part of this program for me is at least trying to learn how I can take some of these things maybe back to the field, because the game for us is way more mental than it is physical, honestly. So.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. So we have, like I said, so ours specifically is HPO. There's a POTF, which is preservation of family and force. Then operation, the H2F, which is holistic health to fitness. So there's a lot of different iterations specifically geared towards improving human performance. Unfortunately, the last element of it is that kind of cognitive enhancement part, because again, it's specifically in the military, there's such a onus of importance on the physicality, and now we're seeing that obviously mental health is just as important. We saw the same trend in professional sports. The cognitive performance specialists and coaches, all of that element in sports psychology, that's within the last 20 years, but sports have been around for hundreds of years, right? So we're identifying that at some point we're going to hit peak human potential in terms of physiology. So the next avenue is how can we improve our mental and cognitive ability to help unlock the last couple percentage points of physicality. So that's a great point. Okay, hopefully we can hear this. So one of the large elements that we're going to talk about as well is conserving neural resources. So athletes have a very good job of, we all understand neuroplasticity. We don't need to go into that element, but our brain does a really great job of creating easy buttons. And so what we identify that as flow state. And if you've ever heard a conversation of, oh my gosh, everything felt so slowed down and I could see so much and I remembered this and it just felt so easy. Again, because the brain does a great job of rewiring and reorganizing these motor skills so they become less noisy within our brain. And so again, flow state is not only identified to athletes, but it's if you're reading a really fantastic book, right? And you all of a sudden 4 hours are gone. You are in a flow state consciousness right there. So when we have decreased neural activity, but we have increased accuracy and focus, that is also considered a flow state recognition. So this is a really, really fantastic video about it. Hopefully the video plays. Somebody put your hands up like this if the video is not playing, and then we'll just kind of skip it and go on, all right?
This is the definitive guide to getting in the zone. I'm Brett Wingeier. I'm a neuroscientist, biomedical engineer, and athlete. First of all, let's talk about being in the zone, what some people call a flow state. Basically, you're in this state of perfect focus where you're not even consciously thinking about things or processing moment by moment. It's a state of relaxed, high performance. That's the zone. Fact is, anybody can be in the zone. It's not just sports. It's anything where you're able to just do it and block out distractions. Repetition is the language of the brain, and it's the way you get better at anything. Here's one study. The National Institute of Health put freestyle rappers in an MRI machine. While they were freestyling, there was less cognitive control because it didn't need to happen. They were in flow, they were in the zone, they were practicing their craft. When you're first learning something, everything lights up here in the frontal lobes. As you become an expert, then that activity actually goes down. All of that gets moved into the subconscious. So the biggest misconception about getting in the zone is that it's this magic thing that only happens a couple times in a lifetime. That's not the case. You can prepare for it. Be well rested, smart, hard practice. Ignore distractions. Part of that could be meditation. Interestingly, caffeine actually does improve performance. You have to find that happy medium. A little's good, a lot's too much. True or false? Sports performance is all about genetics and how big your muscles are. Absolutely false. It's about how well does your brain control them. All those movements that make you an elite basketball player, it's all part of muscle memory. One of the best is this guy, TJ Carey. He's a cornerback for the Oakland Raiders. We worked with TJ with our product Halo Sport. It's a pair of headphones. It helps speed up firing neurons in the primary motor cortex, which means the brain can take in more information really quickly. And he added 9 inches to his vertical leap. 42-inch vertical leap. That's amazing. That's insane. His brain was optimizing the firing of every little part of that muscle and everything that goes into that. Strength is specific. Let's say you're training on a biceps machine. Then what you're really getting best at is just doing that exact thing, is doing that biceps curl. Because it's not just about how big your muscle is. It's about how your brain has learned to use it in exactly that context. And that's why the best physical training is the training that best approximates exactly what you're doing on game day. The thing is, this is relevant to all of us because we all have a brain, we all have a body, we all want to reach our potential. Everybody can have this sensation of, wow, I nailed that.
Okay, so I absolutely love this video, and a lot of these things that I'm going to show you guys today are often what we provide our athletes and also our military representatives to kind of break down what we're capable of doing and kind of break down that stigma behind mental performance and mental health and cognitive performance really as well. So any thoughts or questions, comments about that video, flow state, neural remapping, etc.? No? Perfect. So we're going to skip a couple here just so we make sure we get through some stuff. So physiology in my world looks a lot like
Curtis?
this. Yes.
Sorry, but I think you might be you're showing your screen, like where we can see your next slide, and not seeing the presentation. Like you must have two monitors. So I think you're showing, you need to, if you can switch the presentation. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Does that make sense to everyone else? Because it seems like we should be able to see the screen that you're presenting as a whole screen. Right now, we're seeing current slide and.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and
That
so I
makes
think
sense.
if you go to the top of the PowerPoint, if you go to up, I think it's somewhere at the top where you click, I forget what the heck you click, but you can tell it to switch screen.
Okay.
Yeah, take it, yeah, because it would be great if we
Now,
could
can we
see
see it?
it full.
Can you see it in full now?
Well, no, now you've taken away your
No, we see you
screen.
in full.
Guys, I swear I've used Zoom before.
Are you sure
Okay.
about that?
Well, apparently not. No, apparently not. Okay.
Like a commercial for Under Armour.
Right. Okay. Share. Let's do that. So you guys can see yourselves now, right?
Yeah, yes, and just make it so that it's presentation mode. So probably play, this is Keynote, that's what, yes, that's what we needed. Yes.
Okay.
Yay!
Perfect.
Woo!
Hey, we got there in the end, everybody. I'm sorry
Okay,
about that.
okay, cool.
Okay. So what I was going to say is that this is what physiology and and feedback looks in my world. It's very retroactive and not concurrent, right? So similar to any wearables like an Oura ring or a heart rate monitor, you gather information, but it's not necessarily used instantaneously. And obviously we know the benefits of having instantaneous feedback, doing both neuro and biofeedback. So we see a lot of information and data that these athletes are inundated from day one. And I'm sure Michael can attest to that as well. Being in the military, you are measured and biometrics, everything from day one, everything is measured about your body and to figure out how we can optimize exactly what we need to. So athletes are very inundated with this idea that they're going to be hooked up to things and they're going to be measured, and then their day and programming is going to change based on what their physiology is telling us. That is very much not the norm, obviously, within normal society. And so we can see that with anxiety that's happening specifically with individuals who are being hooked up to a neurofeedback cap for the first time. What are all these wires? What are you doing? What's happening here? Athletes are very much, okay, well, tell me what I need to do. How's this going to affect my training? There's not a ton of control in what they do on a day-to-day. But their physiology and their subjectivity to what they're doing is what helps us identify best practices to train them for that day. So for instance, I used to have athletes with the Olympic teams that wouldn't get out of bed and wouldn't come into training if their resting heart rate was too high. So they are very attuned to what their physiology is telling them, sometimes to a fault, obviously. But when you're in a space and in a point where you can actually succumb to some of that physiological changes and adaptations that you need to, it's important to give it validity as well, something tangible to look at. So sports science and sports psychology and sports physiology is really what this next video is going to look like. And this is not the lab that I work in, but this is specifically what we do as well. So it's a little bit of a glimpse into what is possible outside of just the clinical realm.
Pro athletes in particular are all very talented and are all very efficient at their sport. It's really the minor things, the little differences that can cause a huge advantage. Using sports science to help figure out how a top level athlete can get even a slight advantage can mean something as significant as a gold medal compared to a silver, bronze, or championship compared to a loss. What you can do with sports science with the data that's collected is monitor how much training volume the athletes are actually taking. And with that, you can make decisions on when to rest a player, when a player is fresh enough where you can push them, when practices should be scaled back, or vice versa. A lot of non-contact injuries or injuries in general happen when athletes are really fatigued. And if we can monitor the seek objective information, you're at a huge advantage of trying to mitigate those effects.
The proprietary global athletic assessment at the Sports Science Lab is really the most comprehensive assessment available. We will analyze an athlete from their feet all the way up the kinetic chain, as well as how their brain functions in sport. So with regards to their neural efficiency, their sensory motor skills, all these skills that every athlete needs and develops over time, we will highlight and analyze their skill set. The data that we collect from the global athletic assessment is invaluable to our training staff. The information that we use is constantly referred to and compared to throughout training programs. With that objective information, we're allowed to train the athlete in a much higher capacity.
After our sports scientists assess and collect all the data, we use that information to help optimize their performance. That includes a customized sports performance training session geared towards not only the athlete's sport or position, but to the individual themselves.
The University of Ohio State conducted research regarding ACL injury and the use of stroke goggles. 90% of the stimulus we receive every day is visual. What we do with the stroke goggles is to change that visual processing, changing the way that the brain is going to be reacting to an injury. By blocking visual stimuli, we're going to create a better proprioception, better function of your muscles, a better understanding of where you are, how you are reacting to the recovery of said injury.
Here at the lab, every athlete is treated the exact same way as a professional athlete. Our sports scientists, exercise scientists, athletic trainers, and physical therapists work together to provide a holistic approach to help every athlete reach their highest potential.
So, any questions on that? So that's my day. That's what I do every day, which is pretty awesome. And I'm really fortunate to be able to do that and have the tools in place to be able to do that. So what I always stress is how do we take the information from Saybrook and the courses and all the incredible mentors and faculty that we have, and how can we apply it to extremely high functioning individuals? And that is what has always been the challenge, being in more of the optimal functioning realm, is how do we take these individuals and make them 2% better? Not necessarily create a improvement in any cognitive dysfunction, because again, all these individuals may still be dealing with a lot of cognitive disorders or need to unpack some emotional issues as well. But our job specifically in human performance is to optimize the body while improving their cognitive function as well. And so it's really fantastic. And I love everything about this video, and it shows and highlights the full potential and capability of the human body and the human mind, you know, operating at extremely high functioning elements while also introducing play tic-tac-toe, right? Like do small, like we have the Stroop test, right? When we do any of the biofeedback assessments or stress assessments. So adding cognitive elements into any physical element is automatically going to be doing the same exact thing that's in this video. You don't need all the $1 million machines and all the fancy lights and all that stuff. You can do exactly the same thing by doing a crossword puzzle or a word search in the middle of a squat set or after you've run or sprinted, right? So we put the body into a distressed state, and then we try to improve their cognitive function in that distressed state. Does that make sense? Does anybody have questions on that?
Do you have some of the $1 million equipment in your shop?
Yeah. I would. Yes, go ahead, Bonnie.
Sorry, let me start my video so I'm not just the voice. So you said you put the body through stress to improve the cognitive function, and is that in essence what we do when we learn, when we cross over into performance? You know, like you struggle, and there's that sense of it's a challenge, literally, and then suddenly it frees you up. So if you do it purposefully, what you're saying, by adding the physical element, it actually happens faster, or vice versa. Sorry.
I think there's a possibility to that. Specifically, what's happening in here is, again, we're talking individuals who have peak physical potential already pretty much maximized, or if they're a lower level athlete and they want to get better at it. But that idea going back to decreasing, what is it, Fitt's law? Is that right? If anybody remembers that, where the higher the accuracy, the less neural noise that's required. So the less brain noise, the more accurate you are at something. So again, that goes all the way back to the neuroplasticity side of it. So for us specifically, when we're looking at human performance, and again, human performance optimization versus optimal functioning. So in my world, in human performance optimization, we are looking at ways to improve the holistic individual. And so the way that we do that, because they are so high functioning physically, is we introduce neurocognitive challenges. And so basically then what we're doing is we're looking at how can we increase the external focus of attention versus internal focus of attention.
So you're increasing their tolerance to noise.
Yeah, exactly. Or decreasing their neural noise. Yeah, neural noise by improving their bandwidth, basically, right? So we're opening up their bandwidth to allow them to hopefully get into that flow state easier. By decreasing what the frontal lobe is necessarily needing to process, so that it becomes, again, that easy button is hit. And so again, if you remember if you saw in the video, the individual, dribbling the basketball and then having to track the green dot on a screen. So he's now doing a physical task that requires motor control coming from the premotor cortex, but then task recognition and tracking, dealing with cranial nerve issues, et cetera. So he now has to have two separate processes that are going on. And so that's where we're challenging not only the sensory branches, but also the motor branches as well. But I would probably say that it's probably 50-50 in terms of, do you want more cognitive challenge versus physical challenge? So again, it's really individualized in that, where we have individuals who the very first thing that we will do is we will have them work out with our strength and conditioning staff. And then in between sets, when they're really, really tired, we'll introduce a word search. And then that is the simplest form that we have, or a number, find a number in a group of numbers. So then they're looking at task recognition. Then the next step will be do a task while you're doing a cognitive function as well. And then we kind of play around with those elements, the same idea, 65% success rate, and then build it up, build it up, build it up. So, but great question.
Another example of how you would do this would be if you imagine somebody learning to play the piano, because you've got now 10 different digits, all might be working independently while you're looking at music and having to make sense of it. And, for a lot of us playing an instrument, we're playing one note at a time. If you're playing your trumpet, you're playing one note at a time following, while your accompanist is over there playing chords and notes and rhythms and things like that are 10 times harder. But that repetition and that combining the physical with the mental is kind of ultimate when you're talking about a piano player. It's absolutely out there, and yet we take it for granted.
Yeah, and that's actually a great segue into kind of this cranial nerve challenge that I want to do with you guys. I've been randomly obsessed with watching violinists play on YouTube as of late, like these incredibly talented soloist violinists that are just blow my mind. And not only the motor skill and control that they have, but like you said, Eric, the musicality, how do you emote with an inanimate object? How can you evoke this visceral response by people? And so then they're listening, right? They're hitting specific cranial nerves that, again, are opening up these pathways that then become automatic. And that's a voluntary thing that we can do. And this is something that we do with some of our guys. So I'm hoping that it will work with you guys as well. But in terms of cranial nerves, are we all relatively comfortable with that idea in terms of anatomy and what their function are? If not, we've got a great little picture here. So these are cranial nerves, obviously on the inferior aspect of our brain, going through the cerebellum, and then obviously on the spinal cord versus where they're going specifically to each region of the body. So one of the things that we do, or what I like to do to get buy-in with our athletes or with our military members, is I like to do this little cranial nerve challenge. So if you guys can, I want you to stand up and try and touch your toes like you're stretching your hamstrings out. Or if you're sitting down, put your leg out straight and then, try and touch your toes. And I want you to feel the tension that you might have in the hamstrings, the back of the knee, the calves, etc. Depending on, again, if you stretch normally or not. Okay, so we all kind of feel that. Perfect. Okay, so now what we're going to do, it's going to be a little bit of a pat your head and rub your belly situation that we're going to do to stimulate some of these cranial nerves. So what we're going to do specifically, we're going to hit the trochlear nerve, the oculomotor, trigeminal, hypoglossal, vagal nerve, and then glossopharyngeal nerves. So in order to do that, we're going to kind of hit a couple physicalities with us. So again, the cerebellum we know is responsible for regulating the sequence and the speed of events that happen in terms of motor control. So if you want to touch your nose, your cerebellum has to regulate the speed of which your hand is going there, has to hit the right accuracy, follow that green dot, et cetera, et cetera. So what we're going to do, we're going to take our thumb, we're going to push it straight out in front of us. I'll kind of go across here. And I want you to bring it towards your nose and follow it and track it all the way to your nose. So we're going to kind of cross our eyes just a little bit, and we're going to continue to do that. Okay, so I'm going to keep adding sequences and elements to this movement. Okay, so keep taking a look at that finger as it comes towards the tip of your nose. So right now we're looking at the trochlear nerve and the oculomotor nerves. So we're getting those elements. Now what we're going to do, we're going to take our thumb, and each time our thumb hits the tip of our nose, we're going to push it against our left cheek. Then we go out. As it comes back in, we're going to push it against our right cheek. So stick out, stick out, stick out, right? So, So you're trying to push your tongue against your cheek wall. Okay, while we're looking at our thumb there. Okay, now the last part, hum, while you're doing all three of those parts. Okay, do that for maybe about 10 more times. Looking at the tip of your thumb, hitting your nose, touching the inside of your cheek on both sides, and humming at the same time. I told you it's a little bit of a head pat and belly rub. Okay, go ahead. Now try and touch your toes again.
I think that's what you call interesting.
Oh, wait, but my hamstrings were totally loose that time.
Okay, so what do we feel? So in about 80 to 90% of individuals, this will actually unlock some of the physicality or the motor reflexes within our brain. Why? The idea behind this neuro training, well, first of all, who felt less tension, who was able to touch their toes or got a little bit more length in it perfectly. We didn't warm up. We didn't do anything other than we were stimulating our cranial nerves. So
what if we didn't? I'm able to, touch my toes without having to warm up, but, and I didn't know, is there something about, if you're more in tone, you might have less of a, improvement or whatever?
100%, yeah. So obviously we're going to hit at some point, we're going to hit peak physical potential and peak physiological potential. So our bodies will not let us go any farther than what is A, safe, and B, possible to bring us back from that position, right? So it's like trying to twist and twist and twist. Well, all of a sudden we have to go all the way back. And like I said, in about 80 to 90% of individuals, we will feel a little bit of tone change, partially because, again, the element is that our brain is what's controlling our tonality of our muscles. So it's also controlling the tonality of our tendons and our ligaments, everything else that's involved as well. So for our population specifically, they tend to be very, very tight. They tend to be heavy lifters, Olympic style lifters. So they're very stocky, they're very strong. And movement and mobility are not necessarily in their wheelhouse. It's not something that they focus on so much. And so this is a small way for us to kind of say, hey, look, something that you do every day, you talk, you breathe, you touch your nose, you scratch your face, you look at things all over, all of those elements, just like what we saw in that sports science video, the guy hitting the basketball, tracking something. So he's hitting all of these specific cranial nerves that is stimulating or unlocking the potential of that cerebellum to bring more pathway information, both efferently and afferently. But yes, as you'd mentioned, there are some individuals it doesn't necessarily work with, just like individuals who necessarily are not as susceptible to hypnosis as well, right? So there are elements that neurofeedback doesn't always necessarily work with them as well. So I think there's always going to be kind of that give and take, but it's important to show that there are ways that we can affect what we believe are involuntary. Just like you eat ice cream too fast, you get a brain freeze. That's the nerves reacting. We just call it something socially as, oh, brain freeze, right? But we can actually show the physicality and the physiology of what's happening in that nerve there. So that's always a fun thing to do. And right in the middle of sitting a long time. So specifically with the Department of Defense, and this is something for everybody to be aware of, because I wasn't even aware of this. So the requested budget for 2022 was $762 billion. And 49.5 billion of that, or 6.5%, was specific towards military health systems. So that includes human performance. The contract that I am under is a $400 million contract. That is given to 11 different companies that then employ about 55 specific individuals for each of those contracts. That's a lot. That's a lot of people, and it's a lot of money as well. But you also have to remember that I have 88 guys specific to my squadron, that if every single one of them disappeared, it would cost around $150 to $200 million to replace them, to train them to their physical capabilities. So thinking about if we have a 20-year career as clinicians, how much time, money, and effort have you put into your craft? And how much would it cost for somebody to get that experience back? The military is one of the only places, and sports as well, is one of the only places where you can quantify how much you've spent on somebody's performance, which is really nice. And it's also a little overwhelming when you think of it in that sense. But it also, I put this in here specifically to highlight that there is a huge need for individuals like what we are producing at Saybrook, specifically within the armed forces. And so it's an underserviced population. In sports medicine, only 1.2% of sports medicine athletic trainers are actually in the military setting, which is crazy. 52% are in higher education, or in university settings. So there's just a huge disparity right there. That's why they're willing to spend so much money to get high quality clinicians involved, because it's such an important thing. So we'll kind of go. Okay, any questions? We're gonna kind of blast through a bunch of this stuff, but good, okay. So one of the things specifically when we talk about cognitive performance, right, it's a very hot button item right now. What we're really looking at is like the OODA. I don't know, Michael, have you guys used this or heard this at all?
Oh yeah, this is.
Oh yeah, right. And no, right? Yeah, absolutely. OODA. So those of you that know what this is, so it is specifically, it's observe, orient, decide, and act. And the idea, so we've got competitor 1 on the top and competitor 2. So cognitive performance really identifies how fast can you observe, how fast can you orient to it, how fast can you decide on what to do, and then how fast can you physically act. Then repeat task over and over and over. The winner of that competition is whoever can act faster before the other person, right? So that's why we see this big red splotch here over the decide for the individual, and then the never mind, right? So this translates not only to military readiness, but also to sports specific readiness. So if you're dribbling a basketball, if you are a pitcher or even a hitter, and okay, so I'm going to observe the release of the ball. I have to orient myself to where I am, where my body is. I have to decide if it's going to be a ball or a strike, and then I have to act, all within 0.4 milliseconds. That's insane. That's insane. One of the hardest tasks in sports is hitting a fast pitch softball. It's not hitting a 95 or 100 mile an hour fastball. It's softball, fast pitch, because the distance to the plate is shorter It's an abnormal, we're normal. We observe as human beings from high to low generally, and a fast pitch ball is coming from low to high. So it changes our orientation. You have to decide in a less amount of time, and the act is much harder because the ball is spinning in a completely different orientation. So it's such a cool idea, and I hope that you guys kind of identify with this. Again, like I said, Noah and Michael, I know that this is really hit hard in the military. Of if I can decide and act faster than the other guy, I get to go home, right? And that's really what our world is in terms of performance. Doesn't necessarily mean winning a medal, but it's also coming home safely, which is really obviously very important to all of us. So my question is, in increasing your bandwidth, how would you guys kind of train cognition, understanding that idea now? So observing, so that includes hitting those cranial nerves, right? So vision, hearing, proprioception, attention, orientation, our spatial awareness, context, prioritization, and inhibition, right? We need to decrease the noise so we can orient ourselves specifically to our environment. And then how do we decide on creating a rapid decision-making process, right? So do I want to hit that ball or do I want to let it go? What is that going to do for the runner on first and second? You know, do I need to run left? Do I need to run right? How do I score the soccer goal, etc.? Any of these elements. Do I shoot? Do I not shoot? And then act. How do we get into that CNS and PNS rhythm, specifically to motor control and muscle memory, as we tend to talk about it a lot in sports, is really just decreasing that neural noise. So I'm interested to kind of hear what some of you guys would do, not only in your practice, but in your personal life, in terms of how would you improve your cognitive performance?
I think for me, I would focus the most on decide because I tend to be undecisive. And so just making decisions and then just getting stuff done quicker instead of analyzing it longer and like, I don't know, yeah, like I'd focus on the decide, rapid decision.
That's great. That's great. So then in terms of like, if you were in my unit, then I would say if we wanted to incorporate the observe, orient, and then decide, right? So we've identified those first two elements are relatively okay and comfortable. Then I would maybe have you, doing a race against a competitor. So now you've got a competition-based mindset, and then say, okay, now you guys are going to play tic-tac-toe together, but you're going to do a shuttle run as well. So not only do you have to be really fast, then you have to decide, okay, where am I going to put this next beanbag so I beat this guy? So you have to decide instantly once you've completed a task. So you've oriented yourself and then you've completed tasks. So that's a really great, that's a really great one. Deciding is hard, right? That's a fight, flight, freeze response. So how can we get you into that state quicker? I saw somebody raise their hand.
Hi, it's Catherine. I'm sorry, my video isn't, I don't know what's going on today, but I'm here. And so like, I love this. I've never heard of this before. And I will tell you, like in the last week, I've seen 3 patients in my clinic. I work as a PA in an urgent care department, anaphylaxis, right in, like, it's like, you know, they're yelling down the hall, hey, Catherine, we got a code red. I'm like, oh shit. And I'm running down the hall and I'm like, okay. And then I get there. And I have to say that this whole situation, this decide and act part right there, if I could increase my bandwidth there, that would be amazing, because I don't want people dying, right? And so like getting like on it really quick and being able to do it, not just get on it quick, because, you know, like I can be just like yelling shit at the nurses, excuse my language, yelling shit at the nurses saying, get this, get that, blah, 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 you know, but to do it with a focused kind of calm, that's like the sweet spot. You know what I'm saying?
No, absolutely. And part of that, as I'm sure too, right? You're the very first time that you had a code, you were probably spastic. The 10th, or 15th, or 100th time you had a code, you kind of deal with it a little bit differently, right? So that's the stress inoculation exposure training that the military does so well at, and why in athletes and athletics, they have a scrimmage team. So they want to expose themselves to their opponents, because their opponents, as we talked about, are doing the same thing. They're trying to observe, orient, decide, and act just as much. So that's the part that is really unique to, I think, outside the clinical world, is we are trying to get these individuals to be optimal when they have a competitor doing exactly the same thing, right? Instead of it being just a cognitive disorder where you're your own worst enemy here, right? So you are the one that's internalizing it, and obviously you have influence from your social elements as well, but you don't have somebody who is actively, hopefully you don't actively have somebody who is trying to stop you from being successful, if that makes sense. So that's the really unique part of competition-based mindset, for sure.
Right.
Really great example, Catherine, because it expands. It's not whether you come home, it's your acting depends on whether somebody else gets to go home.
Right.
Very
And
much.
it's scary. It scares the hell out of me. You know, I'm petrified the whole time. I mean, everybody says I look real calm, but I'm like, I got to take a couple minutes after and just chill out, you know, because, whoo.
Yeah, in healthcare, I always say that we need to give ourselves a human moment as well, right? We're human beings at the end of the day. So I always say, you know, if anybody watches sports, so to give you an understanding of what I do, when somebody gets hurt and somebody runs out there to check on them, that's what I do specifically. So that's what my background is in sports medicine, osteopathic manual therapy, is I deal with the orthopedic and musculoskeletal injuries specific to athletes. And so when a gross injury happens, when somebody hits an artery because they got caught on, you know, in a hockey game or something, I am oh shit, that's disgusting person. I have my human reaction, and then instantly my higher order function and training starts kicking in. So that's my way of decreasing my neural noise, is I rely on myself to get out whatever I need to get out, but then I deal with what I need to deal with. And I still have anxiety. And I still remember the first time working with professional baseball, somebody getting hit in the face in the infield, and I had to run out there and deal with it. Something I've dealt with plenty of times, but I've never dealt with it in front of 70,000 people, right? So even in that one moment, it was like, oh my God, am I doing this right? What am I doing? Do I have my gloves on? Do I have this? Who's filming this? Who's dealing with, you know, like all of these other things that I'm now thinking about? But I've relied on my training and my ability to let that kind of easy button hit. Luckily, that's the really nice thing. And absolutely, you go home and you freak out and you're like, holy shit, I need a drink. I need to relax. I need to meditate. I need to unwind. I need to have my neural dump as well. And I think that's something in healthcare specifically that we often forget, is that we need to have our own ways of coping as well. So we need self-care just as much as we do for our patients as well.
Curtis, you may want to check the chat and copy of
yeah.
Michael put in there, you know, to add to your historical aspect.
If interested, oh yeah, absolutely. Bog is so good. I'm so glad that you guys are on here, because it's very often that I don't get anybody that understands what's going on with that. So it's very, very cool. Okay, beautiful. Perfect. Okay, so we'll kind of speed through. So just to kind of show you guys, so a little bit more of an orientation. I know we don't have a lot of time, but an orientation of something really specific. So biofeedback, specifically what I do with my guys as well, is I use it within sports medicine and injury regulation and prevention and management. So we use the Nexus system specifically to identify motor unit pattern issues, or dealing with post-injury motor recruitment. That specifically is what my dissertation was in how can we manage post-injury motor unit recruitment for individuals who are immobilized. So if you have an ACL injury or a fracture, something where you can't move a joint, but you still want to decrease atrophy, that's what we're also doing specifically with our unit. And I want to show a quick video. So we did all this, we'll go through, blah, 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 don't worry about it. So this specifically is one of our ER physicians. She had a plate put in to stop a rib that was subluxing. one of the first individuals in the entire world who had this procedure done. And so she came to us and was having difficulty with activation of those specific muscles. So we hooked her up to the Nexus. We put her with a Zucker fly because it's the Air Force, so everybody loves to fly stuff, right? And so what we're doing again is we're looking at the external focus of attention. So we're giving them something to focus on that isn't their own body. It's the difference of saying, okay, I want you to push against the wall and squeeze your biceps as much as you can versus I want you to push the wall down, right? So if you're focusing on squeezing one specific muscle, like they talked about in that sports science video where we're just doing this, versus if you're doing the task. So we're asking them to focus on the task of flying the plane and not necessarily focus on the task of squeezing a specific muscle. We're obviously playing around with the thresholds in the background. So in the video on the left, we can see she's kind of doing it just a little bit. It's super fatigued, she weakens out. And then we'll go to the next one where we see that she is getting a lot more control. So she's on a rest break. Now she's getting a lot more control with an eventual rise in the shoulders as well. So she was asked to do 2 tasks, motor recruitment here. Again, flying the plane the entire time. And then the very end, we have her doing the tri-level setup in terms of now she's pushing the table away from her. She's activating those muscles and she's improving her breath control. All of those are all part of the feedback loop that we're working with. So, and you can hear her kind of grunt a little bit. So she's maximally putting maximal effort into motor unit recruitment instead of necessarily what's going on with those muscles. She lasted with us for about 4 weeks and she's completely back to normal. And so it's really fantastic. A couple other elements that we did, we looked at ACLs and the average is about 12 to 18 months after the initial surgery to come back to full duty in the military. The military is very big on duty loss days. And we were able to bring all 7 of our ACLs back within 6 months. So that right there translates to 180 days of non-loss of duty days. Which is really important in terms of military benefits and payouts. Specifically, when an ACL injury, there's about 33% of individuals who don't ever return to work because of that injury specifically. And that's why I love doing the applied part of biofeedback and neurofeedback, because there's so many ways that we can apply what we learn at Saybrook specifically to your population. So with that, I'll kind of leave it. I know we're at time. So any questions or anything like that, please just obviously reach out or let me know.
Yeah, please. Any questions, anyone?
That was cool.
Yeah,
Thanks,
that was
Iris.
really fun.
This isn't so much a question as the video that you showed where people were using their cranial nerves, I guess, sort of as a distraction so that they could do better physically. Can we get a copy of that information?
Well, we have a video. The way that you framed it just now, Rich, I'm not sure that that's exactly what's happening. You're saying a distraction. Why do you say it in that way?
I didn't have better vocabulary for it.
Okay. Okay.
Just the idea that you can get your physiology working by better by changing your cognitive functioning, I think is wonderful, but it was essentially dual tasking.
Very much so.
And I'm not being critical. I just want to get that so I can show it to some of my students that are not here. You know, the thing
absolutely.
With the cranial nerves and then people being able to improve.
There are not direct connections from the cerebellum to the cranial nerves, but there are a lot of indirect. There's a lot of song and dance going on before, you know, You know, and through the brainstem and all of that kind of stuff. But
It's by the basal ganglia or
basal ganglia, 100%. Yeah. Basal
I had a
ganglia.
brush up on my neuroanatomy. That's a long time ago. But
All of this stuff that we learn in school, but I've never seen such a cool demonstration.
Right. I have a comment too, and just to play
I
off of
want
what
to get that bit.
it seems like what you're dealing with is the gating, the switching, because if you're tense and then you temporarily focus on something else, the part of you that's tense will relax because it forgets to hold the tension. And so when you have more control, when you have more awareness, I think is the key, and you can build that unconsciously by just practicing on the switching, because you have to focus on one thing at a time. You can't do both knowingly, but your body can if you get good at switching task.
I don't agree with that 100%, because, you know, if we're really tense, you know, for example, in our leg muscles, when we just did what we did, if we're really tense, we don't have to be focused on that to remain really tense. In fact,
but the muscles are focused on remaining tense because they've been holding that position for so long.
Yes, but if you're distracted, if you're doing something else, those muscles are going to remain stressed. There, you know, that's why when you go back to them, they're still stressed. You know, I don't think it's a diversion. I think it's a reallocation of resources in the areas that are oh gosh, it's tricky because the yes, you know, when the cerebellum is more involved in involuntary stuff and not voluntary stuff. So, you know, if you have muscle tension, then that's more involuntary. And then when you bend down, that's voluntary, and then you notice that you've got this involuntary muscle tension. And to do something to distract, if you will, I don't know if it's 100% the cerebellum that is causing that to happen. I also wonder if it's a perception of a less tense leg muscles. I don't know. To me, I'm sorry. I don't know the research, but I do know the brain, and it's very interesting. It's very interesting what you're saying. I think there's a lot to it.
Well, the key is the performance improves, and that's the point. And so there has to be something to it, and that's the test. And then, you know, I mean, and it harkens to why meditation helps people focus. If you learn to do nothing, then you're relaxed. You can be alert at the same time, but you have to train yourself to do that. And people think meditation's doing nothing, but it's not. You have to keep coming back to task. So you're interrupting your own distraction constantly, and that helps build your focus muscle.
Curtis, your example really reminded me of growing up. My father was a golf pro, and you think what's involved with playing golf: head down, arms straight, knees bent. You've got multiple things that you're told to pay attention to all at the same time. And with practice, it becomes some mindless, but in the meantime, you have to think about one of those things. If you don't keep your head down and you look up to see where the ball went, it probably didn't go. But there's always multiple things that you have to learn when you're playing golf to coordinate over and over again. So it's a little bit like thumb and tongue and humming at the same time, you know, and lots of repetition.
I wonder if that task would help your drive.
Well, it's become my new favorite hypnotic induction anyway. You know.
But Curtis gave us a great demonstration that we all got to do, and I'm hoping
you know, I think
we'll be able to provide that.
Of course, yeah. I think that the important thing to do is to remember that we have two individual pathways that are kind of converging, right? So if we're looking at, so again, my world is physical medicine. So the body and me, we get along really, really well. The part of coming to Saybrook was so I could learn more about, even if I can get a tenth of what, Cynthia understands in terms of neuroanatomy, then I feel like I've become, a really nice holistic approach. In terms of the physical body, so when you bend down and you feel that neural tension, that muscle tension, so we are identifying both efferent and afferent pathways. So it's called arthrogenic muscle inhibition, is something that stops you from wanting to use something when you hurt yourself, right? You stub your toe. I know, Rich, this is in a lot of your lectures. You stub your toe, what do? You squeeze it. Why do we feel the squeeze and not the pain anymore? It's because the difference in speed of signals traveling from peripheral up to brain, and then what it's identifying, we like pressure more than we like anything else, right? So we have two signals that are converging, and there has to be a crosstalk in some capacity. So our frontal lobe identifies what it is. It goes to what is the area 6, the sensory motor branch, and then goes to the primary motor cortex, which then elicits the change. So if we can somehow kind of bridge those pathways, that's really what we're looking at. And specifically with the humming and the nose touch and all these things, absolutely. Is it a distractory element? 100%. But I didn't tell you what it was going to do, right? I didn't tell you, I didn't give you, hey, now when we do this, you're going to be able to touch your toes. Now go and do it. What did you guys feel was the question, right? So we can always kind of look at those elements of play on words and play on psychology. That's why sports psychology is so effective, is because we're not improving, we're not making them a better baseball player. We're optimizing their function as a human person, as a bag of cells. That's really what we are. We are a bag of cells that are driven by a neural network. And so if we can optimize that neural network, then it's responsible for the individuals with the physiological elements to improve their physicality and their biomechanics and all these other decision-making skills and blah, 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 blah. That's why the integrative approach is super, super important. And why sometimes we have success with clients and we don't have success with clients in the clinical world is because we might not be able to get all of those other elements involved that's really necessary for their total holistic health. So in terms of that tension that we're feeling, and then we don't feel so much tension, again, it's the efferent and afferent pathways, which are really, really what we're looking at. And I've spent 20 years on the body and I'm still learning stuff every single day, right? Like it's insane, and things are changing so rapidly. But for me, I hope what you guys are taking away from this is if we can show little bits like this, it gets people excited and then they want to come in, right? Like it's the difference of playing neurofeedback game with a kid who's playing Nintendo games versus a crossword puzzle. They're not going to be engaged with it. So it's not necessarily, we know the treatment's going to be successful, or it should be successful, but it isn't because we aren't engaging with them appropriately. Athletes, we have to be really good at making stuff interesting. Long-term rehabs, when it's a 7-8 month rehab and I see them 5 days a week for an hour every single day, I have to make it really interesting, which is what I love about what I do. And yeah, I'm so grateful that you guys listened to me ramble about this tonight. So thank you.
Well, we want to thank you for definitely for being here. And that was definitely a highlight of the very first meeting of the SSPA.
It's the best.
I'll send you my picture like this.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks.
No, thank you guys, everybody. And hey, I'll shoot my email in the chat if I can again figure out how to use this. And again, if you guys have any questions or anything, or any of the fun stuff that we are doing, always let me know. That's my personal, that's the easiest way to go about it. So yeah, I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Curtis.
Thanks, Curtis.
Good night, everyone.
Great.
Bye. Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.